This free step-by-step video comes to you directly from Haynes, creators of the world's best repair manuals. Fix your car or truck the right way with our accurate and reliable information at your side. You can complete more than 200 jobs on this vehicle when you purchase the complete online manual at Haynes.com.
Thermostat replacement. Open the rear doors and lower the rear seat backs. Slide the rear seats as far forward as possible. Remove the rear seat mounting nuts. Lift the flaps in the carpet to locate the airbag electrical connectors and disconnect the connectors from the rear seats, then disengage the wiring harness retainers from the brackets. Raise the seat backs and slide the rear seats as far to the rear as possible. Remove the front bolt trim cover from the left side rear seat and remove the bolt. Remove the front bolt trim cover from the center and right side, then remove the bolts. Remove the seat headrests and lower the seat backs. With the help of an assistant, remove the rear seats. Remove the fuel filler cap to relieve any pressure built up in the fuel tank. Cut the carpet at the module access cover locations and flip the carpet back to access the fuel pump module cover. Remove the fuel pump module access cover fasteners and cover. Unplug the electrical connector from the fuel pump module to disable the electric fuel pump. Start the engine. It will run momentarily, then stall. Crank the engine several more times to ensure the fuel system is completely relieved of pressure. Open the driver's side door and pull the hood release lever located by the kick panel. Pull the hood safety latch forward, then raise the hood. Loosen the cable clamp nut. Insert a flat blade screwdriver between the clamp ends to slightly expand the clamp, then disconnect the cable from the negative terminal of the battery. Once the cable has been disconnected, secure the cable end away from the battery terminal. Grasp the front of the cover and lift the cover up until the grommets in the cover are free of the ball studs. Then lift the rear of the cover until the grommets in the rear are free of their ball studs. Apply the parking brake. Chock the rear wheels to prevent the vehicle from rolling. Place a floor jack under one side of the vehicle, positioning it under the reinforced frame area. Then raise the front of the vehicle. Support it with a jack stand placed under the notched area of the rocker panel seam. Then lower the vehicle onto the jack stand and remove the jack. If raising both sides of the vehicle, move the floor jack to the opposite side and place it under the reinforced frame area on that side. Raise the front of the vehicle, then place a second jack stand under the notched area on that rocker panel seam and lower the floor jack. When raising both sides of the vehicle, make sure the vehicle is level. Loosen all of the screws around the under-engine cover, both front and rear. Then, working from one to another, remove the fasteners and lower the under-engine cover from the vehicle. Disconnect the electrical connector from the intake air temperature (IAT) sensor. Loosen the intake air hose clamp at the throttle body. Disconnect the intake air hose retainer using a screwdriver or trim tool. Remove the intake air hose mounting bolt. Carefully disconnect the intake air hose from the throttle body. Loosen the intake air hose clamp at the air filter housing. Then disconnect the fresh air tube from the intake air hose. Then remove the intake air tube from the engine. Disconnect the electrical connector from the throttle body. Disconnect the throttle body support bracket fasteners and remove the support. Remove the throttle body mounting bolts and the throttle body from the intake manifold. Remove the cowl panel corner trim seals. Remove the windshield wiper arm fastener covers using a small screwdriver, then remove the wiper arm nuts and wipers. Remove the cowl panel fasteners using a trim tool. Lift the cowl panel up along the front edge, then disengage the rear of the panel from the windshield and remove it. Remove the lower cowl panel fasteners. Disengage the electrical connector harness retainer from the lower cowl panel, then remove the lower cowl panel. Disconnect the fuel line quick connect fittings and have rags ready to soak up any residual fuel. Disconnect the fuel line locks, then depress the quick connect release tabs and separate the fittings and remove the lines. Using a screwdriver, separate the injector sound insulator and carefully remove the insulator. Disconnect the electrical connector to the manifold pressure MAP sensor. Loosen the air filter housing fresh air duct clamp, then separate the duct from the top cover. Loosen the filter housing top cover mounting screws. Use a magnet or needle nose pliers to remove the mounting screws from the top cover. Slide the cover toward the front of the vehicle, then lift the cover up and out. Remove the filter from the housing. Remove the air inlet cover duct fasteners and duct. Remove the air filter housing fasteners, then pull the housing off of the grommets and remove the housing. Disengage the coolant expansion tank retainers using a trim tool. Remove the air filter housing mounting bracket nuts and bracket. Remove the coolant expansion tank mounting bolts, then lift the tank up and out of the grommet and secure the tank out of the way. Spray some penetrating oil close to the exhaust fasteners and allow it to soak in before loosening. Loosen and remove the front exhaust pipe nuts. Remove the front exhaust support bracket fastener. Remove the front exhaust pipe from the exhaust manifold. Remove the intake manifold lower support bracket fasteners and bracket from under the intake manifold. Place a small block of wood onto the floor jack, then place the jack head under the oil pan and slightly raise the engine. Remove the right engine mount fasteners so the engine can be moved forward slightly. Then remove the intake manifold insulator screws and insulator. Release the injector connector locking tabs, then disconnect the electrical connectors from the injectors. Remove the intake manifold bolts and nuts. Be sure to take your time and get all of the fasteners. Carefully separate the intake manifold from the cylinder head and check to make sure nothing is still connected, like the sensor connectors or wiring harness retainers. Remove the intake manifold support bracket nuts and bolts. Once the manifold can be moved, remove the support bracket fasteners and bracket from the left side of the intake. Carefully lift the manifold up and out of the engine compartment. Cooling system draining. With the engine completely cool, remove the cooling system expansion tank cap. Attach a piece of hose to the drain fitting. Move a large container under the radiator drain to catch the coolant. Open the drain fitting. A pair of pliers may have to be used. Allow time for the coolant to drain completely. While the coolant is draining, check the condition of the radiator hoses, heater hoses, and clamps. Replace any damaged clamps or hoses. Once the system has drained completely, remove the drain pan and close the valve. Pour the coolant from the drain pan into a marked container for reuse or proper disposal. Loosen the positive cable clamp nut, then disconnect the positive cable from the terminal of the battery. Unscrew the bolt and remove the hold-down clamp from the bottom edge of the battery. Remove the battery insulator from the battery. Lift out the battery. Be careful, it is heavy. Depress the locking tab, then rotate the connector levers and detach the electrical connectors from the powertrain control module, PCM. Remove the mounting nuts and the PCM. Disengage the powertrain control module wiring harness retainers. Remove the PCM bracket fasteners and remaining harness retainers, then lift the bracket out and off of the battery tray. Locate the vacuum tube connected to the vacuum pump. Push tube in slightly and depress the quick connect fitting, then detach the tube from the pump. Remove the vacuum pump mounting bolts and make a note of the different bolt locations. Carefully remove the vacuum pump from the cylinder head, making sure that the two O-rings on the vacuum pump are still with the pump. Disconnect the upper radiator hose clamp using pliers and remove the hose. It may be necessary to place a rag over the hose to protect it, then use the pliers to loosen the hose and remove it from the inlet. Disconnect the lower radiator hose clamp using pliers and remove the hose. Remove the harness retainer from the housing. Pull the red lock on the coolant temperature sensor up, then disconnect the electrical connector from the sensor and move the harness out of the way. Depress the coolant bypass hose quick connector locking tabs, then disconnect the hose from the housing. Remove the intake manifold support bracket nuts and bolts. Remove the thermostat housing cover lower bolt. Then, using a screwdriver, bend the lower hose tube support bracket back from the thermostat housing. Remove the thermostat housing cover bolt. Depress the coolant hose quick connector locking tabs, then disconnect the hose from the housing. Using a trim tool, remove the wiring harness retainer from the intake manifold support bracket. Using a small screwdriver, remove the coolant hose locking clip, then disconnect the hose from the housing. Remove the intake manifold support bracket. Remove the remaining thermostat housing cover bolt and detach the thermostat housing. Using a rag saturated in brake cleaner, clean cylinder head area of the thermostat gasket sealing surface. Remove the thermostat housing O-ring gasket and clean inside of the thermostat housing. Install a new thermostat housing O-ring gasket into the groove on the housing, making sure the gasket is seated in the groove. Apply a film of coolant to lubricate the thermostat gasket. Install the housing cover and thread in the lower right-hand corner bolt, then the upper left-hand corner bolt. Tighten the two corner bolts securely. Install the intake manifold support bracket bolts and nuts, then tighten the bracket fasteners securely. Using a screwdriver, straighten the lower hose tube support bracket back against the thermostat housing, then install the bolt. Tighten the thermostat housing mounting bolts to the specified torque setting in several stages. Remove the gasket from the intake manifold. Clean the mating surfaces of the manifold, then install new gaskets on the manifold. Clean the mating surfaces of the cylinder head, then install the intake manifold onto the manifold studs and install the stud nuts to hold the manifold in place. Install the intake manifold bolts and nuts and tighten them hand tight. Tighten the intake manifold bolts and nuts to the specified torque setting. Connect the electrical connectors to the injectors and push the locking tabs down. Connect the electrical connector to the manifold pressure (MAP) sensor. Install the intake manifold insulator and tighten the screws securely. Connect the harness retainer to the right side of the intake manifold. Install the intake manifold support bracket and bolts. Tighten the support bracket fasteners securely. Connect the harness retainers to the left side of the intake manifold. Slide the engine toward the rear until the engine mount bolt holes line up, then install the mounting bolts. Tighten the fasteners securely. Lower and remove the floor jack from under the engine. Tighten the engine mount to strut tower fastener to the specified torque setting. Tighten the engine mount to frame fasteners to the specified torque setting. Install the injector sound insulator. Connect the fuel line quick connect fittings, then connect the fuel line lock. It should snap into place. Connect the fuel line quick connect fittings, making sure they lock into place. Then connect the fuel line lock. It should snap into place. Install the coolant expansion tank onto the grommet. Then install the mounting bolts. Tighten the coolant expansion tank mounting bolts securely, then install the harness retainer. Install the air filter housing mounting bracket and nuts, then tighten the nuts securely and install the hose retainer to the bracket. Install the air filter housing onto the grommets, then install the housing fastener and tighten it securely. Install the air inlet cover duct and fasteners, then tighten the fasteners securely. Install the filter into the housing, making sure it is seated evenly. Install the filter housing cover to the housing, then the air filter housing fresh air duct into the air filter housing and tighten the clamp securely. Install the filter housing cover mounting screws and tighten them securely. Working under the vehicle, install the intake manifold lower support bracket and fasteners, then tighten the fasteners securely. Install the front exhaust pipe to the exhaust manifold, then install the support fastener. Install the front exhaust pipe to exhaust manifold nuts, then tighten the nuts and support fastener securely. Clean the lower coolant hose quick connect ends, then install locking clip to the coolant hose clip and install the coolant hoses, making sure the hoses click firmly into place. Connect the coolant bypass hose quick connector to the top of the thermostat housing, making sure the connector clicks firmly into place. Then connect the coolant temperature sensor connector and push the red colored lock on the connector down. Clean the thermostat housing outlets for the radiator hoses. Clean the inside of the lower radiator hose, then reinstall the hose. Install the lower radiator clamp using locking pliers. Clean the inside of the upper radiator hose, then install the hose. Install the lower radiator clamp using locking pliers, then install the wiring harness retainer. Using a gasket scraper, carefully clean the sealing surface for the vacuum pump, then use a rag saturated in brake cleaner to clean the remaining cylinder head area. Remove the 2 O-rings from the vacuum pump. Then use a rag saturated in brake cleaner to clean the vacuum pump surfaces. Install new O-rings into the vacuum pump grooves. Apply a small amount of RTV sealant where the cap meets the cylinder head. Install the vacuum pump and mounting bolts to the cylinder head. Tighten the vacuum pump mounting bolts to the specified torque setting. Push the vacuum tube onto the vacuum pump fitting and depress the Quick Connect fitting to seat the tube onto the vacuum pump. Install the bracket and fasteners and tighten the fasteners securely to the battery tray. Then reinstall the harness retainers. Clean the PCM electrical connectors and harness electrical connectors with compressed air. Install the PCM harness retainer to the bracket. Install the PCM to the bracket, then tighten the nuts securely. Install the PCM connectors, then push the connector down into the locked position. Reinstall the lower cowl panel and fasteners, then tighten the fasteners securely. Install the cowl panel, making sure the panel is secured against the windshield, then install the plastic retainers. Install the cowl panel corner trim seals and fasteners. Install the windshield wiper arms and nuts. Tighten the windshield wiper arms securely, then install the covers. Remove the rag from inside the throttle body and clean the throttle body mounting surface of the intake manifold, then install the gasket. Install the throttle body and throttle body mounting bolts, then tighten all the bolts evenly by hand. Tighten the throttle body bolts to the specified torque setting. Install the throttle body support bracket with the bolt on the bracket and tighten the upper bolt to hold the bracket into place. If the bolt falls off, use a magnet to install the bolt. Install the PCV tube to the PCV valve and connect the electrical connector to the throttle body. Install the intake air tube ends into the air filter housing and throttle body, then connect the fresh air tube to the inlet duct. Tighten the intake air hose clamp at the throttle body. Tighten the intake air hose clamp at the air filter housing. Reconnect the coolant hose retainer. If the retainer breaks, which is common, use a plastic zip tie to secure the hose in place. Then connect the electrical connector to the intake air temperature sensor. Install the intake air hose plastic retainer. Then install the intake air hose mounting bolt. Tighten the intake air hose mounting bolt securely. Install the battery onto the battery tray. Install the battery hold-down clamp and tighten the clamp bolt securely. Install the insulator around the battery. Connect the positive battery cable to the positive terminal and tighten the cable nut securely. Connect the electrical connector to the fuel pump module, then install the fuel pump module cover and tighten the mounting screws securely. With the help of an assistant, place the rear seats back in the vehicle. Install the seat front bolt, then install the right side rear seat front mounting bolts. Tighten the bolts to the specified torque setting. Then reinstall the access covers. Slide the rear seats as far forward as possible. Install the seat rear mounting nuts. Tighten the mounting nuts to the specified torque setting. Then reinstall the access covers. Lift the flap in the carpet to locate the airbag electrical. Reconnect the connectors and the wiring harness retainers to the brackets. Raise the seat backs and slide the rear seats to the rear. Close and tighten the radiator drain fitting. Place the under-engine cover onto the vehicle and align the fastener openings. Then install the screws and tighten them securely. Raise one side of the vehicle at a time, then remove the jack stand and lower that side to the ground. Then raise the other side of the vehicle and remove that jack stand. Remove the chock from the rear wheels. Locate the radiator vent valve at the upper right corner of the radiator, then loosen the vent valve. Locate the heater core return hose quick connect fitting and squeeze the two release tabs, allowing the hose to separate slightly. Once coolant is added, this will allow coolant to flow into the water pump and prime it. Remove the expansion tank cap, then slowly add the correct type of new coolant until it reaches the heater hose return line. Push the heater hose quick connect fitting back together. Using rags, clean up any of the coolant that came out of the quick connect fitting. Place rags under the cylinder head drain plug, then loosen the drain plug. Continue to fill the cooling system, then loosen the plug a few turns until bubbles start to seep out, followed by coolant. Once bubble-free coolant starts coming out, stop filling the system and tighten the plug securely. Continue to fill the cooling system until air bubbles start to seep out around the radiator air vent valve, then tighten the vent valve securely. Slowly continue adding the correct type of new coolant to the coolant expansion tank until the level is at the max mark. Clean the expansion tank cap, then install the cap and tighten it securely. Locate the 4 ball studs on the engine and the 4 grommets on the cover. Place the engine cover on the engine, aligning the grommets with the ball studs. Once they are all aligned, push the cover down until the grommets lock into place on the ball studs. Connect the cable to the negative terminal of the battery. Tighten the cable clamp nut securely. Start the engine in a well-ventilated area or outside and allow it to run at idle for about a minute. Then increase the engine RPM to 3000 for 30 seconds. Turn the engine off and let it cool for 1 minute. With the engine still sufficiently cool, lift up the cap from the coolant reservoir and top up the coolant reservoir with coolant until the level is slightly above the min mark. Clean the expansion tank cap, then install the cap and tighten it securely. Start and run the engine again until it reaches normal operating temperature. The thermostat will open, the upper radiator hose will become hot, and the fan will cycle on and off. Rev the engine to 3000 RPM for 30 seconds, then allow the engine to idle again for 30 seconds. Turn the engine off and let it cool completely. The coolant level should be between the min and max marks on the lower side of the expansion tank. Start the engine again and allow it to reach normal operating temperature and check for leaks. Set the heater and blower controls to the maximum setting and check that hot air comes from the air ducts. This is a good indication that all air has been purged from the cooling system. Close the hood.